Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon to those of you in other time zones. Welcome to Geocortex Show and Tell. This is our first installment in our three-part series. I'm Lisa Cottrell, brand manager here at Fergus North America. And I wanted to thank you all for taking the time out of your day today to get to know what some of our customers are doing with their Geocortex technology. We have a really tight schedule today, so we're going to move right along. Show and Tell etiquette today is we have 3 15-minute presentations with 5 minutes for questions. We ask that you please write your questions in the question box. And after our presenters are completed, they will have their questions moderated to them by my partner here, Shane. Shane will read through your questions, allow our presenters to answer. And then at the end, if we have time in that 5-minute question window, you will have the ability to unmute yourself and make a statement or ask a question or share something with us. If we don't have time to get to all of your questions, we will respond via email like we do after the Road Ahead webinars. So please include your questions in the question box and we'll make sure that we get those over to our presenters to have your questions answered. For those of you that have another meeting to jump off to in a half hour or an hour from now, our goal is to wrap up in 60 minutes. If we do run long, don't worry. We will be recording this and distributing it after the series is complete. So you'll be able to share it with your colleagues or catch up on what you missed. I do ask too that you bear with us. I think like everyone, we're getting used to working in the virtual world and trying different technology to facilitate these types of presentations and meetings. So if we run into a little bit of trouble, please bear with us. So without further ado, let's introduce today's presenters. We're going to be starting out with Mr. Jeff DeWitt from Georgia Power Community and Economic Development Group, followed by Brendan Ford from Fairfax County GIS Department, and closing with our own Colin Doak, a technical advisor here at Geocortex. So first, we'll have Shane hand it over to Jeff to get into what they're doing over at Georgia Power with Geocortex. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lisa. I appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you for the opportunity. So we're going to bounce around a little bit between several of the different applications that we have to kind of show you kind of what we're doing and kind of some of the newer things that I'm looking to update or change. So first of all, I guess just a 30-second elevator speech of what we do in economic development. Our whole goal at Georgia Power is to basically just bring and attract new businesses to the state of Georgia. So we partner with the State Department of Economic Development in Georgia to do that. And we have a whole project team and research team and engineering team that facilitates all those different types of projects and expansions throughout the state. It's also important to note that we don't serve everywhere in the state, but everything that we show, we actually showcase the entire state of Georgia. So even if though potentially we don't serve power to that particular project, we will still identify those particular pieces of land or buildings, even in areas that we don't serve. So our whole motto is really, what's good for Georgia is good for Georgia Power. So just kind of a 30-second elevator speech of to why we do what we do and why a utility company is doing economic development. So first of all, I'm going to show you kind of what's on our main landing page. So our website here is selectgeorgia.com, and that's kind of where we have all of our products and resources available to anybody looking for information about the state of Georgia. So specifically the page I'm looking to now is what we refer to as kind of our site selection tool or property search tool. And this currently is embedded inside of our actual website here. So I'm going to not do a whole lot in this embedded site just because when I'm doing presentation, I need as much screen as I can. So just know that on our site selection page, this is where kind of the general public or anybody looking to do searches or get information would end up. So I'm going to quick jump over to kind of our development site. This is my UA site, and the main reason I'm showing you this, and I'm going to bounce back to the other page, what you see here is kind of a first iteration of this, and you know, as a GIS professional, I'm very used to a lot of buttons and tools and functionality, which is, you know, really what you would expect from a GIS application. So what we've really tried to do is sort of rethink kind of the whole user interface of this and really try to help users guide them through potentially what they're looking for. So this, again, is in my development, but you can kind of see the whole interface is a little bit cleaner, a little bit tighter, and not as many tools exposed, and I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit of that. And the main reason for this is again, really focusing on what our end users are coming to our site to do and focus more on the sort of that story or that user experience and kind of what they would be doing instead of just going in and starting clicking buttons and going through different things. So first thing I'll point out is right on our home screen, you see, and again, this is a work in progress, so we'll probably add a little bit more text. But really the idea is the major reason why someone would come to our website is to search for properties. So you'll see when they click on this, what's actually happening in the back end is just a series of forms that are done in a workflow that kind of help guide the user to do different things. So in this case, we're just looking for properties. And in this example, I just do some search for sites. And in the background, this is just throwing it to a site search workflow that has a form with a lot of different criteria on here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I'll just show a quick example of, say, someone putting in 500 acres. Maybe they need it to have rail served, and probably want to have all utilities right there on site. So once I go here, I'll do a quick search, and you'll see it's presented, and I got a little bug here where I need to make sure it defaults back to the results. But you'll see it's presented with a list of all of the different sites that meet that criteria, and you can see as I scroll through, they're highlighted in each one. Another thing that I did to try to make this even a little bit easier for the users is on the feature description, really give this a lot more context to it. So, for example, we did a nice picture. I've customized some of the basic fields here. We're showing location, available tracks, and I may add a few other attributes to show right from here. The other thing that I want to do that I haven't fully implemented yet is to be able to run a report directly from here. And also I'll show you the example of how you can use Street View. And the reason why Street View and all of this is becoming more and more important is this sort of idea of virtual visits. We, like everybody else, are not sure when our prospects or companies are going to be able to visit. So in person to a lot of these locations, so the ability to be able to look at these different properties in a virtual environment is going to be extremely important to us. So Street View is a great tool for just to do some of that right off the bat. And the other reason why I'm trying to incorporate a lot of this right here is a lot of people, for better or worse, don't know all the information that's available in these context menus. So we're trying to present sort of the one or two things that the user would want to see kind of right in that first view of what they're seeing for a particular piece of property. So I'll click on a specific piece of property. You can see here that's just the inflated image of what that looks like. And if I go into the details of the site, you see it just zooms to the location, and again, some of that same links are available right here. Now I'm going to go to Street View here, and it's not going to look like much because the lat longs that I'm using don't always go to the right spot, so I'm going to have to zoom out a little bit and put the little peg man into a spot. But you see real quick and kind of get an idea, if we have Street View available, of kind of what the surrounding area for that particular location is all about. So that's a real simple little link you can use to add the lat longs to get that Street View to work. So then kind of the next typical step would be, so if someone is interested in that particular piece of property, they would want to run a report. So again, I'm working to get this report link right from here. But for now, as you guys know, familiar with Geocortex applications, you have to go to the context menu to do that. So I'm just going to pick the site report, and then you'll see some of the additional functionality that we're using on this report. So this is customized where when you click report, it's actually running a workflow in the background to get some additional user input. So there's a series of different options that the user can pick to add information to the typical one-page report about the property itself. So I'm going to just kind of focus on the demographics. So this demographic data is coming directly from the Esri Geo-Enrichment API. So all of those calls are made real time to make sure that we get the most current data and information. In this case, I'm just, again, we can pick on radius or drive time. I'm just going to leave the default to radius. And I'll show you the option of uploading custom logo here in a minute. But once I click on that, basically it's running the workflow, pulling all that together, all that information together, and then presenting the user with the output. So what they get is a nice one-page report with all the information about the property. But the cool thing is an actual Esri demographic report that we've customized, and we did a nice little one-pager here that shows the information on both the 1, 3, and 5 minute area based on the user input here. So in just a couple clicks, the user can get a lot of the information they need directly about the property itself. We've also added information about the workforce, taxes, transportation, nearest ports, for example, incentives, different state or federal area, as well as detailed information about the demographics. So that's available at every single piece of property that we maintain. So kind of the other user experience behind this would be back at the home screen. So if they don't want to just search for properties, maybe they're just looking to get information about our communities in Georgia. And again, I'm not sure exactly what the final text will look like, but it's kind of the idea of exploring the different communities in Georgia. So if a particular user has maybe narrowed down a specific location and they want to get more information about that city or county or a specific area, they can do that as well. So in this example, I'm just going to show you a city, and again, this is just a little workflow on the back end here. In this example, I'm just picking, these are all the incorporated cities in Georgia. So I was just going to pick Atlanta. If I can get that from my list. And cool, nice little thing there is when the user clicks on it, it go ahead and draws the graphic just so that the user is familiar with where that area is on the map and all that. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can select a logo. I have issues on my computer where it doesn't select the file right away, so I'm going to give it a couple times, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to show you the actual report. Oh, here it goes. So in this case, this is a user logo that the user can upload to kind of customize the report for their specific community. So if I'm going to go ahead and load that and then run the report, in this case, this is just an Esri demographic community report that when they click on that, you'll see it added the user logo directly into that profile report. So this is the standard community profile report from Esri with a little customization to add their logo plus the Georgia Power logo. Obviously, we want to make sure we're branded in here as well. So again, just a little more of that kind of user functionality to get information on different communities. Another really cool little thing that we added was the ability to, I'm going to cancel this out here just a second to get rid of this graphic, to do a custom location. So in this case, if they don't want to get information about a specific community or county or city, and say they were interested in a very specific spot. So what this allows them is to kind of go through a process to get specific information that they would be looking for. So these are kind of just the main demographic reports that we think that our users would like. And again, I've just clicked off a little sample here so they can get an idea of what that report is actually going to look like before they actually generate it, and essentially, and it's kind of the little samples from Esri. So the user can see what the sample of the report is going to look like. So in this case, I'll just keep a demographic and income profile. And again, behind the scenes here, this is a workflow that's just running through a series of forms to guide the user what to do next. In this case, I'm just going to leave the address. So this is going to run a geocode on that location. And then I'm going to go ahead and just leave the default here. And what's going to happen is it'll create those buffers, zoom to the area, generate the report. And then as the user sees here is that demographic income profile based on their different areas. So in this case, this is the 1 mile radius. And if I scroll through here, you'll see the 3 miles, so on and so forth. So it gives the user a lot of flexibility to get information about all the different areas in the state in addition to searching for properties and reports. So the next thing I'm going to do is kind of jump over to our internal site, if I can remember what tab I'm on here. So we have both an internal and an external version, and right now this is running on two different environments. One, our external environment is running out in Amazon Web Services in their server environment, and then we also have one running in our internal environment. And we have a lot of reasons for that, but I'll leave it there for now. But just wanted to kind of give you a different flair for how our internal users are doing that. And again, you'll see I have a lot of these tools and buttons kind of exposed. That's going to be another thing. We're going to kind of try to make the user interface a little bit more user friendly. So I'm just going to give you a couple different examples of how we can use how we're using some of the interesting workflows and other tools for kind of the different types of work that we do. The one request that we get a lot is, if I'm looking for say a prospect comes in or a project is saying, I need a very specific size to put my building on. So what we've come up with is a nice little tool that will draw a graphic to those very specific dimensions. So this is what I'm called a custom layout. And what it does is allows the user to add a graphic at very specific dimensions right onto the map. So I'm just going to, again, leave the default. And what happens is that actually draws the graphic, centers it in the middle of the screen, and then allows the user to kind of rotate it around, look at it, move it, rotate it. And once I'm done with that, I could click to add text and say, this is the site, whatever. And then I can kind of move that around, so on and so forth. And the reason why this is important, yes, I could go in and just draw a graphic on here, but I wouldn't know the exact dimensions until I draw it and then have to measure, draw, measure, draw, measure. So what that little workflow does is that it adds the graphic at that very specific dimensions to whatever the business is looking for in terms of their site-specific layout. Then obviously next step, I could go here, I could print and make a map, which I have an example of what that might look like. This was what I did for another one. So we just have a little template set up where I've drawn that site in here, added some text and all that. And it's, again, just right out of the box functionality. But again, sometimes it's the easy, simple stuff that your users really want and types of tools that they need. So a couple other little things that I'll show you. One thing real quick here, you'll notice that we integrated Google Base Maps. Now this was some custom work that we did with Geocortex Professional Services in order to do this. And it's not perfect. It doesn't function exactly like a base map. We can't print it because it's not a base map, but for what we do, it's really important to have very updated imagery. So that's been a huge benefit for us to be able to add Google Base Maps. So one other thing I'll show you kind of goes back to the demographic data set. So we'll have requests a lot of times where we just need to get like specific spreadsheets of demographic data. Now, Esri has a lot of great built-in tools in order to do that, but we needed something really simple for our internal users to respond to these types of requests that we get. So all I did was just write a little workflow that parses through the thousands of different Esri variables that you can get demographic data on. So I've just kind of used their default categories and then allow the user to pull in different attributes. So in this case, I want information about total population. So I want information about income, and so I'll add the median household income. Maybe some spending information, so I'll add some retail. Again, I'm not even sure what I'm picking here, but the retirement plans. And then what it allows the user to do is at what level is the data going to be gathered. So in this case, we can do by MSA, by county, or by zip code. And I'll just sort of use the default here. And I'm going to zoom out just a little bit because then I'll show you how we can use it also based on a different location. So I can run it all for the United States, for certain states, or in this case, I'm going to pick a custom area. So this one just allows me to say, pick a spot on the map. Again, I can use a drive time or fixed radius. I'll just pick the radius. It draws that area. So now you see the actual extent of where you're going to get your data from. And now when I run submit, the other thing we wanted to see was how much, there's always a cost when you're running these types of requests. So it gets a quick idea of how much that's going to cost us. So in this case, all of the 1 penny, so that's great to know. So I'm going to hit OK, and then this actually uses a little plugin from GeoWidgets, I think, and I probably didn't get it correct, but it allows that information to get downloaded directly into an Excel spreadsheet. So when I pick OK, I'm just going to default the name, and then you'll see it actually generates right here the spreadsheet. And if I probably already have one open, you'll see here. Now, the formatting isn't exactly where I like it. There's a lot of fields in here that I really don't want, but you can see the actual data that we picked is all right here for you. So with just a little bit of work, you can make that spreadsheet really nice and get the information. So just a really quick little way for us to use a lot of the Esri demographic API or the geo-enrichment API to pull a lot of information. The last thing I'm going to show you here, if I have that tab open, is we've added some information, some workflows on startup that we can share with our communities to help them identify specific properties for them automatically. So for example, in this case, when I click and run this, it's going to select all of the buildings and land sites that are in the county of Baldwin County. So when I run that, basically what happens is running that startup workflow, parsing out the data, and then selecting all of the counties or all of the properties in Bartow County automatically on startup. So this is the kind of link that we can share with our communities. They can put that on their website. It's just a quick and easy way for them to be able to market their properties directly through a link and not have to worry about maintaining all that information. So I know it went really, really fast there, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea on how we're using a lot of the built-in functionality from workflows and reports to highly customize and configure this to hopefully make a really good user experience.
Thanks so much, Jeff. That's great. And yeah, you covered a lot in a short amount of time, so we appreciate that. I'm going to pass it over to Shane now. Shane, we have about 2-3 minutes to get some questions out to Jeff if you want to start facilitating that.
For sure, yeah. It looks like we have a few questions. So the first question came in from Sean Fiakapong. Sorry if I mispronounced your last name there, Sean. His question was, is that portion of the panel with the panel and the links that you were showing a little earlier, Jeff, is that a custom JavaScript that you created, or did you have Geocortex Professional Services do that?
If they're referring to kind of the startup page here, and I think that's probably what they're referring to, no, this is just straight out of the box functionality here. These are just links to run different workflows, which you can embed directly inside that. So everything, pretty much everything that I showed you, with the exception of when you're looking at certain pieces of property. So for example, I didn't really point this out. When I look at a particular piece of property, you'll see that I have specific reports that are only available for sites and not buildings and all that. So there was some custom code written behind the scenes that allows the user to see only the reports that correspond to this specific feature. But everything else that I'm showing you here, this is all straight out of the box. So this is just running little workflows here. This is just running another little form and using a lot of the events on click to do different things, like to load forms or to create graphics. So it's literally all just out of the box.
Great, thanks. Next question is from James Landwehr. His question is, the Google overview map embedded in the results that you showed earlier is really nice. I'd be interested in getting the code for that if you're okay with sharing.
Yeah, so that is, if you look at it here, this is using the Google Maps API, the static size. So this actually is an attribute that is currently stored in our site data, and we're just linking off to that, but you could certainly build that on the fly. And you see, the one tricky part about this is the encoding, and so the actual site boundary itself, without getting too much into the weeds, is all encoded here. So that part gets a little tricky. I've actually used FME, for those who are familiar with that, to generate all of these links sort of in the back end, and then I just store that link as an attribute on the feature to get those. So I've kind of tricked it out that way, but I guess with some work you could probably programmatically do it. But it's all out of the box Google Maps API stuff.
Okay, great. And Lisa, maybe let me know when we're close for time. There's quite a few questions coming in now, so we might not get through all of them. But the next question is from Chris Dunlop. His question is, do you have a limit, or do you have any limits on credit use? The ESRI reports are, as some of you may know, 10 credits each, and that can add up.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I'm glad you mentioned that. So when we started this, we just everybody can select 10, 50 properties and run demographic reports, and yeah, our credits got out of hand pretty quick. So about a year ago, we worked with professional services, and I'm going to give a shout out to Peter Platten here, who's been fantastic helping us. We've done some work on the back end to sort of really make those requests efficient and as less costly as possible. So one thing I'll probably do here in the future is limit that option. So right now, if I run a site report from here, and you'll see I can include demographics from that. Well, that's going to be on all 11 sites. So I'm likely going to end up just restricting that to be run on a single feature at a time instead of multiple. And the issue, even though with all the work that we've done, we've seen some huge spikes in our credit usage, and yeah, it's important to us, but yeah, we also got to keep that in mind. So I would only say the work you got to do is kind of limiting the number of features that you send a request to, and try to just be very thoughtful about when you let your user do that. But yeah, it's a give and a take with that.
I think we have probably time for one more, Shane. And then what we'll do is, like I said, we'll make sure that we get these questions out to Jeff to get the answers. Jeff, I might put you on the spot for a minute. Are you able to stick around after the meeting, or do you have a hard stop?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Perfect.
I'll be happy to stick around.
Maybe what we'll do too, because I see a ton of you have your hands up, and I don't want to stop the conversation, but I also want to respect the fact that we said we would only take an hour of people's time. So if you have a question for Jeff, stick around after the presentation, and we'll continue the webinar, and we can have more discussion with Jeff and Brendan and Colin for those of you that have the time to stick on the line. But Shane, if you want to...
And Lisa, if you want to, I'll be happy to share my email address directly with you, and in case anybody wants to email me directly, I'll be happy to do that.
Great, thanks.
Great, okay. So one last question then. This one's coming from Roland Shield. His question, he's got a couple here. Are the details for the Phase 1 environmental site assessment reports available? That is, does the state of Georgia make the well logs, the chemical spill history data, etc. available publicly?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's not information that we maintain for each of these individual sites. So that's not information that I'm maintaining and putting into these reports here. All that to say that we have relationships with the EPA, the local Environmental Protection Division. We have a Georgia Brownfield Association. So we partner with many different agencies to kind of get the answers to those very specific questions, and we get those questions all the time. So it's kind of a balancing act about how much we make available to the public for a given location versus, kind of having them narrow down a few locations and then trying to answer those directly. So we're trying to strike that medium, but for that specific question, we don't maintain that. We kind of refer to our partners for that.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. And for those of you, like I said, who don't have to jump off to another meeting at the top of the hour, stick around and we can continue this conversation with Jeff. What we'll do now, though, is we're going to hand it over to Brendan Ford from Fairfax County, Virginia, and see what they're doing over there with their Geocortex apps.
Okay.
Great, we can hear you.
Okay. Oh, wait, clean. Hang on a second. That didn't work the way I envisioned. Are you seeing my screen okay?
We sure are. We see a beautiful Stanley Cup.
So my first thing I wanted to do was tell my friends in Vancouver and Toronto that if you ever get to this moment, it will be the happiest moment of your life or very close to it. So just keep the faith, guys. It's worth this. It's worth it. Once again, my name is Brendan Ford. I'm with Fairfax County, Virginia. I have just a couple PowerPoint slides I will share with you, and then I want to take you into our application. Just a quick slide about GIS in Fairfax County. We are an enterprise GIS. We have created over the last 8 to 10 years about 125 targeted business-specific applications. We have a very large user base of desktop GIS users. And this next slide was the slide that I used to use to talk to how we got to using Geocortex in the first place. That orange area in the middle is what I call the middle tier. And that was the area of user base that we felt a Geocortex type application would serve. On the left, you have these simple web applications. On the right, you have kind of high-end desktop. And there was this area in the middle that was unserved, and that's where Geocortex came in. We actually implemented Geocortex in about 2015, transitioning from a different product. I've changed that slide to look like this. And the area on the left is, again, your simple targeted web applications, limited functionality, often one or very few times that are used by particular users. The green area is where our GEM and JADE applications really fit the bill perfectly. Still a lot of users, very targeted workflow, a much higher degree of functionality, a lot of layers available, but it's often repeated over and over again by many users. In fact, for some of our users, that is their daily, their day is spent using this particular application. The blue area is kind of new. It's the ad hoc WebGIS and application creation. Hasn't been around for a while, and really the Geocortex functionality bleeds into that area. In fact, that's one of the areas we're looking to explore next year. And then the purple is kind of your traditional high-end desktop users. And much of the functionality we think we're going to be using in Geocortex will take people from that who are now sort of stuck using a high-end desktop piece of software and bring them down into that green area, if you will, and reduce the footprint of desktop usage. This is my information. I'm happy to share this at the end and handle any questions. As Lisa mentioned in the intro, we have been very successful with an application for years called the Geographic Exploration and Mapping Application. And I've shown this at Geocortex user conferences in the past. And once again, thank you to Geocortex for having an annual conference in our county. That was really nice. I'm going to show you this only to show you what we have internally that we don't have publicly, and make a few comments about this, because this application is the reason we have the public application. Just on our basic toolbar, we have some custom features, and one of them is a mailing list. We do not have a publicly available mailing list. This is used pretty intensively internally. We also use the project menu quite extensively, and many of our users create their own Geocortex or GEM projects. They do add some data, but that's not used as much, although that is one of the features we want to put in the public application eventually. We did not open up the ability to save projects to the public, and one of the things I'd love to hear from people out there who have done applications is, have they exposed that functionality and how has that gone for you? We also have custom searches, plenty of them that meet specific workflows. The, sort of a standard parcel, address, street intersection. I kind of highlight the stormwater search and the wastewater search, because you would think those specific searches would mainly be used by the public works stormwater / wastewater department. In fact, when we exposed these searches to everybody and just made one interface, one of the things we found is that our Board of Supervisors staff members who deal with the public on a day in, day out basis use that search extensively, and they were ecstatic because people call and complain that there is a stormwater structure that's overflowing, and those staff members will go in, find that particular structure ID number, email it to the stormwater management group, and they know exactly where to put in a work order. So really interesting, that exposing information. Those are the big items that we put in that are not in our public application. I do want to let you know of one anecdote. We put this application together, again, it was serving that group of users who needed more than a simple web application, but probably were never going to get to the desktop level. And we have over 1,000 unique users of this application within the county every year. There's an awful lot of rotating staff, obviously, but those who use it in the land development office use it all day, every day. And my favorite story is one day I got an email because our server had a hiccup, and the email came from somebody in our land development office, and it said specifically, GEM is down, no economic development is occurring within Fairfax County right now. And I took that email into my boss and I said, we need redundancy or we are going to get slammed. Our GEM application is on, I think, Essentials 4.11. The JADE application is the public version of GEM. And one of the reasons we always knew we wanted this, Peter McLaren and I were talking yesterday, he asked me about the concept of having a more robust web GIS application available for the public as opposed to the targeted business-specific approach that you would take with an ArcGIS Online application. And my answer is there is definitely a user base for both. We have an advisory council to our Board of Supervisors called the Environmental Quality Advisory Council. And their representative saw our GEM application, and in that report that goes to all of our elected officials, very clearly it said, you need to make a version of the GEM available to the public. So it had a lot of fanfare going forward. Just a little bit for those of you who don't know where Fairfax County is, we're right outside of Washington, D.C. Currently, we're the COVID-19 hotspot for Virginia, so something that we've got going on here that we're quite proud of. One of the things with the JADE application, I don't know how many of you do this, but we did a fair amount of promotion and we sent letters to industry letting them know that the application was going to be available. We have two things available from the help menu. One is an overview video that's 10 minutes long, has a little music to it, and takes you through, the various components of it and what the application is about. And then when we did our interactive go-to webinar for the public, we recorded it, we cleaned it up a little bit, but that is available for anybody. And that, that does get viewed. I know it's also been viewed by other developers, but we had 60 or 70 people from the public attend the webinar and they stayed the whole time. And we do have help that's broken down by section of the application. So if you want to know more about searching specifically within Fairfax County, we've got help for you as well. The GEM application has, I believe, a little over 270 layers that are available. The JADE application, we pared that down and there are, I think, 170 layers available. Quite a bit of our work that went into the application was vetting that data and making sure that it was presentation quality available to the public. There's a few things you can expose behind the firewall that we just didn't feel comfortable exposing to the public, not because the data was sensitive, but because it wasn't of the sufficient quality that we really wanted to have. I want to just talk about a few things that we've incorporated. One, with base maps, I assume a lot of you use the World Topographic Base Map from Esri. We were an early adopter of that particular base map, and we contribute our data to it. But one of the things that our county users use is the property base map. And so we have a couple custom base maps. This is a seamless base map. It's obviously a grid-based system, but this is seamless countywide. And as you zoom in, you're getting what the tax maps, as they're referred to, look like, and the actual information. We similarly have a zoning base map that's countywide and seamless, very colorful, nice to look at. We've also included the light gray canvas and the dark gray canvas for those people when they want to highlight data. We make sure that those are available. Another thing that we do with imagery is we have a fair amount of imagery available to the public, going back all the way to 1937, and the slider bar is very well received. This feature here on the map is called Burke Park, and it happens to be near my home. And it wasn't until I was playing with the slider bar one day that I realized that that's a man-made lake. Never really dawned on me, and it was built in the 60s. And you can go all the way back to 1937. So this imagery gets viewed quite a bit, and we are adding to our imagery library. So we are taking the negatives from way back in the day and processing them and trying to create a more robust image library. So that gets used quite a bit by the public, very well received. Let me turn off that and go to imagery. From our global search, we are searching by address, parcel number, and place name. One of the things that we are doing now that we will certainly try and improve in the future is we are using a string search as opposed to more of a Google-like search. So if you type in government center, 12,000 government center, give me a break. How about this? Oh, let me refresh. It's doing a string comparison search, and so we're not using the fuzzy logic that we would like to be using. Another thing that we have, that I would stress that we've done throughout our applications, both internally and externally, is that if you identify a parcel, we have links directly to other county applications that are widely used. So our real estate assessment application, and you can even get the court recorded deed for a particular property. I should say that that's a system you need a login for, but people in the public do have it. There are two reports that are key to this application. One is called the General Parcel Report, and that particular application drills down at the parcel level and gets a variety of information drilling through various layers. And the other one is the Environmental Parcel Report. What that's doing is getting environmental aspects like watersheds. Let me go ahead, and we have multiple ways that you can get at those reports. So if I go and click on them, here's actually as they come up. The General Parcel Report is giving you assessment information. It's giving you planning and zoning data. It also gives you ownership data and some other information. The Environmental Report has a lot of disclaimer and explanatory text associated with it. This is used quite extensively by our development community. So it's got watershed, floodplain, resource protection area, soil type associated with it. And again, those reports are very powerful. We make quite a good use of those. I will say that this application has some very vocal champions outside of the county. I know people on our planning district commission and local supervisor district commissions who use this all the time in public settings and public meetings. They're reviewing zoning applications, and so they are using this application, and they send me emails all the time about how happy they are. What they would like to have that we haven't implemented yet is the ability for them to add data. So if I am looking at an application for a rezoning, or there's construction going on and I'm out here, what they want to do is add a proposed building plan or a road widening on top of the existing data that we have and use that in a public setting. And so we hope to incorporate that in the future. We don't have the street view imagery. We were not allowed to integrate with Google. I think that might have been lifted, but at this time we don't have that, although we would love to have that. I mentioned back on my initial PowerPoint slides, we have a fair number of ArcGIS desktop users. A lot of those people are in that space because somebody wrote a custom application for them to be there, and that's how they get their information. Our Public Works Department is actively using or exploring using Geocortex and the workflow functionality within Portal to take all of those users and get them off of desktop and into a custom workflow application within Geocortex. So that is an actual targeted goal that they have for this coming year, as we're trying to transition people out of the ArcMap space and into the ArcGIS Pro space. We do have some basic searches in our publicly available application. We didn't include a lot of the custom searches. We had to sort of draw the line somewhere. One of the things that we did struggle with is making sure the mobile version of this application would be usable, and certainly in the future we want to improve on that. There was an awful lot of work that went into vetting out this data and getting this application live and deciding what goes where, but we have had nothing but positive reviews, and the usage has been very high. And again, it really fits into that space. And from my perspective, our kind of resume of publicly available applications is now complete, now that we have the full gamut of applications available. So with that, I would take any questions if we have time. I'm able to stick around after the presentation. I know I wanted to leave time for the next presenter.
Thanks so much, Brendan. Yeah, so why don't we pass it over to Shane? We'll get a couple questions in, and then we'll move over to Colin. And everyone will notice that in the chat, I have shared my email, Brendan's email, Jeff's email, and Colin's email. So if you want to follow up directly with any of us, that I'll hand it over to Shane now for a couple questions quickly.
Sure. So we have a question here from Roland Shield. His question is, are you able to leverage Arcade for the ad hoc context, such that you can offer custom filters, symbolization, etc., without revisiting the enterprise GIS once the REST endpoints are available?
We haven't gotten into that just because so I don't know that we can or we can't. It's just not something that we've addressed at this point. I'm now more on the front end education user side and a little less on the development side. But I can kind of ask our development team where we are with that and get back to you.
Okay, thanks. Next question is from Barbara Mori. How are you serving aerial photography?
It's all image server through we have a public image server, and so it's all coming through our public image services.
Great. This is the last question that I see here, Lisa. This one's from Warren Rowe. His question is, what resources, like employees, skill sets, etc., do you need to maintain the Geocortex applications themselves?
That's a good question. I would say our team that developed this application included 2 developers and probably there is a lead developer, but it was really 2 primary developers and a couple people from our customer services team that did the documentation. From a maintenance aspect, when we come out with new releases, there's still 1 primary developer working on GEM and another one who is assisting her on Jade, and then my team will do documentation or training or outreach. I would also add that we have, every month, we have, they're now virtual, we have classes for our internal county staff on the use of the GEM application, and those usually have 12 to 20 people in them. So maybe 5, you know, at various times, not full-time. I think that's good.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And stick around after if you have more questions for Brendan, and we'll unmute the lines and we can facilitate a conversation there. Brendan mentioned COVID-19, and I know that, you know, we've all been inundated with that over the last few months, and it's something that whether you're working for a private company or you're, in local government, state government, that's something that we're all facing, sort of this new reality. And it's a really good segue into Colin Doak's presentation around a proof of concept he's built for PPE, personal protective equipment, tracking and distribution. So we'll pass it over to Colin now.
Great, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, you sound loud and clear.
Great. Okay, so title of my my presentation here is keeping staff safe and departments running, but really what I want to talk about is personal protective equipment, or PPE. So we've seen over the course of the last few months, personal PPE, the stuff that protects workers from infection, is becoming more critical component of COVID-19 infection control strategies, and it's really become very important for opening up the economies around the world. So we've seen governments really struggle with rolling out guidelines and policies for opening up businesses, for organizations, and also ensuring that the workforce is safe. And depending on what sort of organization you're in, your exposure in the workplace will vary, but it's looking more and more like there is going to be a requirement for some level of PPE in the workforce or in the workplace, and there's going to be more and more guidelines being put in place to ensure that's happening. And if we don't have those in place, the obvious thing is that we're exposing staff and our customers to potential infection, and we're compromising the safety of everyone in the community. We may have an outbreak of the virus within the organization and then beyond. So it's a very important component that we have PPE in place in order to make sure that doesn't happen. Of course, beyond the human impact of this, an outbreak in the workplace can result in closures, which leads to disruption of the workforce, and also when we have policies and when we have guidelines, it opens up organizations to potential litigation and fines if the organization is deemed to be negligent in some way. So it's very, very important that large organizations have the logistics in place to ensure that all their workers have access to PPE. And this is, as we're seeing, around the world, this is a challenge, especially for organizations that have a geographically distributed workforce. So one question I'd turn to, to everyone that's on the call here on the conference, what's your budget for PPE for 2020-2021? If you're in an industry where PPE was already prevalent, if you're in a dangerous workforce, public works, utilities, any energy vertical, PPE isn't anything new. But for a lot of organizations, having a budget for PPE just wasn't on the radar at all 3 months ago, and now it's become a forefront. Add to that the fluidity of a government reaction and mitigation as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak. It's a very difficult and challenging situation, given that, one, you have to do a bulk purchase of PPE, and then you have to ensure that PPE is being distributed to all the people and all the employees within your organization in a manner that addresses their needs and ensures that they're safe. So we've got a bunch of different components here. We've got supply chain management, we've got bulk purchase, we've got distribution, we've got a very fluid environment, and that's going to be result in either people not getting what they need, or in some cases a large cost to the organization as a result. For example, if there's a situation where guidelines, you have employees who are unionized, and there's guidelines in place from the union that they must have a hand washing station on site before they do any work. If you don't have one there, the work site could be shut down. That's going to cost you an awful lot of money, and notwithstanding even the potential human cost if that's not in place and the workers go ahead and work there anyway. So how do we address this? I think that this is a great challenge or problem that can be solved with a web GIS application, and especially using Geocortex technology. So I envision a dashboard application that includes maps, tables, charts, all the things that you need to be able to manage or view the status of PPE across an organization. So this could be job sites, this could be crews, field crews, or it could even be individuals. And then you want to be able to manage the distribution of PPE and the logistics around that. I think this can be done best through workflows that encapsulate the supply chain management process, or better yet, interface with a third-party logistics application or software. And then the final piece of this, of course, is that you want to be able to get a feedback or information from the field. So I think that's best addressed through a mobile application that includes a Geocortex workflow, or for workflows that allow mobile users in the field to be able to report back and give an idea of what the levels of PPE they have in place, what they need, and thus in the end ensure that they have all the pieces in place to do their job. So really, to summarize, what we want to do is we want to have an application that does two things. One, that it reduces the downtime due to lack of PPE, and also reduce employee health risk due to having to work without appropriate PPE. So you never want to be in a situation where somebody is forced to do something that might compromise their health or cause an outbreak of COVID-19. So with that in mind, I went through a process of putting together a proof of concept, and I'll show you that right now. I'm not showing the mobile piece, but I'll show you the dashboard. The use case I'm looking at is, I try to think of something that would be outside of the normal realm of PPE use or distribution. It probably, for a lot of organizations where you already have a need for PPE, I'm thinking, like I said earlier, a utility company or public works, they already need to have, masks or gloves or eye protection, things like that. But say, you're a school board, and here we're looking at Los Angeles County. This is a dashboard I put together using Geocortex Web, backed by a few workflows, which provides a snapshot of the COVID-19 status. Most of this data is fabricated, but the actual COVID-19 case rate here, this is something I pulled from the Los Angeles County website and put it into a geodatabase. So these are actual case rates by city in Los Angeles County. So the use case I'm looking at is, say you're working for the a school district similar to what you have in Los Angeles County. You need to be able to distribute PPE to all the public schools within your region in a manner that addresses their needs. So what I was thinking is, in this case, there's a workflow that fires up and populates this case rate chart. This could be whatever you needed in respect to being able to identify, what is the hotspot, what are the areas that are in most need. And that way you can very quickly look at the map and decide, okay, well, I need to ensure that, the hotspots are actually getting the supplies that they need. And if they don't have the supplies they need, that has to be mitigated immediately. So that's just with a quick glance, you can have a look at that. But we also built a workflow here which organizes the data. We have the different cities by case rate, and what this allows you to do is very quickly go to locations. Let's go to San Pedro, and then have a look at the schools within that location. And what I've done again is a workflow, and it goes through, and I've set up a whole bunch of KPIs over here, which gives you an idea of the PPE that they have available at that school at that given time. Now the idea is, of course, that on the other side of this, we've got an individual who's responsible for the PPE in that school with a Geocortex mobile application, collecting the information and feeding this back into the web GIS, so that you're getting a pretty good live snapshot of what their PPE counts are. So you can see here, we've got the KPIs that are color coded. You can see that the N95 mask count's getting a little low. Hand sanitizer is quite getting low. So there's the need for this particular school right here to get an update of their PPE. The workflow includes the ability to do that. So we could go through and up the number of masks that are to be distributed. On the submission of the form, this would go off to likely a third-party logistics application or supply chain management workflow, which would then be make sure that those supplies were dispatched to the 15th Street Elementary School as quickly as possible. So you can see that just by drilling into the data, being able to see, okay, we've got an area where we've got an outbreak happening. There is a definite need, and then we can see very quickly that, all right, there are aspects of their PPE that are starting to get low. We need to get that out there very quickly. And of course, you could go through all the schools, but that have very quickly go through all the schools and identify what they need based on their PPE rates. You can see their vinyl count glove is quite low in this particular city and this school. However, there isn't a dire need, I don't think, because of course there's not an outbreak happening in that particular area. So the takeaway I wanted to have from this isn't necessarily that this is the perfect PPE dashboard, but what I was able to do, using Geocortex Web and Geocortex Workflow, is put together this dashboard in it took me about 4 hours of actual work to do this. The workflows are fairly simple, but it shows how you could piece this together very quickly. And I think that's a very important takeaway, is that given how fluid the situation is in respect to COVID-19 and how fluid the government guidelines are, it's important that you're able to build out these dashboards, and if required, make modifications. For example, add additional KPIs or build additional workflows that help mitigate and help distribute PPE within your organization. And with that, I'll finish up and be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Colin. That's great. And thanks for sharing just the amount of time that you put in. I think that's what I always find so fascinating about our technology is how quickly you can spin things up just straight out of the box, and the value that has, especially at a time like this when it seems like things are moving so quickly and it's things that we didn't always anticipate that would be coming, for better or worse. Shane, were there any questions in the chat specifically for Colin?
No, there's a few comments which you know, we can share that with you after Colin, but nope, no questions right now.
Perfect. Then I will take over here. Perfect. So that concludes sort of the formal portion of today. Again, thank you all for taking the time. This is a great opportunity for us to connect and share our stories at a time when we're all very sedentary, and the flexibility is great that we can do this, and I hope that we can see you next week for the next installment, which is Thursday, June 11th, 10 o'clock Pacific time. We have another great lineup for you, including Jeff Pope from Texas Boll Weevil Eradication Foundation, a great story there about how Geocortex Mobile is helping keep the cotton industry thriving in Texas. We also have our CEO doing a presentation and hopefully facilitating a conversation about the impact of COVID-19 on your day-to-day work. All right, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you again next week. Take care.